Holly, Emily, thank you so much for joining. I'm really glad that you both had the chance to join the Center for Independent Journalists Conference recently to learn a little bit more about freelancing and some of the things that you can both apply to what you're doing. I'm looking forward to hearing both of what you took away from this event. Holly, when you sat in on some of these presentations and conversations, what were some of kind of the high level important topics that you feel like are going to linger with you?
Yeah, I especially really like the sessions on things like contracts. There was some stuff about self-promotion, about financing, all of those things that we all have to think about all the time. The mechanics of running your own small business essentially as a freelance journalist. There's so much to think about other than just writing. So I thought the sessions were really great, and the advice felt very applicable and real world as well. I really liked that they had panel sessions with, like, say, it was about contracts and they had a lawyer, but then they had some journalists as well. And they were just all kind of chipping in with sort of real world examples. Sometimes in the past, I've tried to Google things like, contract questions, and invariably you get an article that is probably content marketing written by a law firm. And sometimes they tell you what you should be looking out for, but there's not always a lot of information about, once you've found something that could be a problem, how do you go further and think about whether it is a problem for you, and how do you decide what to do about it? And that's what I really loved about this conference. There was so much advice on that kind of thing. Journalists suggesting, this is what you can do if you want to change a contract, this is when you should, this is when it might not be so much of a problem for your situation, depending on what the article is and what it's for and what the beat is. And yeah, loads of suggestions about how to actually move forward with those negotiations.
One of the things you mentioned there, self-promotion, that can always be a challenge for people, whether that's as a means to try to find more work, or even, I imagine, just share the work that you're doing too. When it comes to self-promotion, what were some of the things that you kind of saw as tangible takeaways that you and maybe others can put to use?
Yeah, I mean, I guess they were talking about building a brand on social media, things like that. I'd have to go through my notes on the particulars. I don't know if Emily has anything in particular on that one as a takeaway.
Yeah, it was really good, because actually I ended up launching my own website and my own social media following watching that, because they talk a lot about how social media and marketing, you're managing how people perceive you, what they perceive your value to be, and you need to put that out there. And so establishing your own brand really means something. So you need to ask yourself, what am I passionate about and what is needed in the marketplace where you're coming into, specifically in beer. It's like, what am I passionate about in beer? I'm passionate about science, and that's what I've been writing a lot about as the freelancer for so far, is writing about science. But what else do I see that's needed in the marketplace, and how else can I apply my own skills as that? And then be the winner. Like, people want to be on the winning team, report on wins. Like, there's such a negative aspect to journalism sometimes that, that people just want to be brought down, or that you'll get more clicks if you're negative. And it's like, no, people want to hear good things. People want to feel good, make them feel good. And just, don't be afraid to speak up for yourself, and draw those boundaries. You can draw those boundaries on social media, but also when you're doing contracts, when you're working with editors, because being able to say no is going to help you figure out more and more what you want to say yes to. So it's like, yes, I am willing to work on this particular contract with you, but I might not necessarily want to do that with somebody else. And being able to work and understand those kinds of moments. And since I'm so new to this kind of world, this was a wonderful way to really learn how to approach it without just frankly doing a lot of Googling, because Google's great, but it's not going to necessarily like give me such a condensed way of, hey, this is how you can move forward, and that this is actually a viable career that you can have for so much of your life. There were a lot of people that were attending that they've had a career, they were freelancing before, they did their career, and now they want to go back to freelancing. So they're looking into the world in a completely different way than they did 20 years ago. So being able to have kind of these, okay, this is how you can move forward. This is how you can begin taking those first steps. Because it's sometimes really challenging when you're doing anything new because you don't have a ladder or you don't know where to find it. It's lost in the shed and no one's going to tell you where it is until you pull everything else out of it. And by then, is it really worth it? Do you really want to climb up it?
Hollie, Emily mentioned something there that can often be really important because, covering the beer industry is not the only writing beat there is, that being able to interact with people from outside of the kind of the beat that we work day in out can be valuable. Getting the chance to interact with journalists who cover a whole host of topics. What were some of the things that you learned, maybe from the way that people were thinking or talking about other beats?
Yeah, I'm just going back to my notes now, and on the self-promotion session, one of the topics that came up a lot was how to make yourself an expert in something, and they were talking about that being a good thing to sort of build your personal brand. And obviously this was a conference for journalists from all beats, many of whom would not have had a particular specialism. So I guess for people who are beer or beverage industry writers in particular, if you've got one particular beat, that part starts to take care of itself because you're becoming known for one thing. So it definitely made me appreciate that having a beat, as all members do, I think, of the guild, can be a really positive thing. And I guess I've never known anything else because I don't have journalism experience without having a beat. So yeah, that's. I guess it's interesting to think about how much harder it must be to build that kind of specialism without that. But yeah, it is really great to hear from writers from other beats and also who write for more general consumer publications. I think a lot of us have maybe a little bit of experience doing that, but maybe not so much as the more industry specific publications. And it was interesting hearing them highlight, which types of publications might be more difficult to work with and things like that. So yeah, it's nice to put things in perspective.
Emily, you kind of listed a whole host of things that you were learning about, and for all the things that we have to do as journalists, time can obviously become very important in the way we spend it. Were there any time management tips or anything that you learned from listening to people about how they spend their days or try to schedule things efficiently that might have rung true to you?
Yeah, I found that they started off immediately with time management, organization, and efficiency. So, because I mean, like I already have my own business running firmly, so I have a lot of flexibility. And so they just kept reiterating something that I constantly preach, which is look at the week holistically. Don't just look at everything from a day to day. If you look at your week, you are going to be able to figure out more of how to allot your time and what you are committed to being able to do, what you want to do, and where you can put all those things. You can find a daily rhythm that works for you, but you also need to give yourself permission to not beat yourself up when you don't do those things. Keeping in mind what is getting you paid, make sure that you track time because you want to make sure that you're doing all right with it. Some days you're not going to be doing as much as you would like, and that's okay. That's okay. And another thing that they pointed out that I hadn't really considered is you need to manage your pitches, rejections, pays, and time. And that's something that for a lot of us, I feel like we just kind of put things out into the world and hope that it manifests. And it makes it kind of hard to keep track of like, well, what is landing? What isn't landing? And am I getting paid my worth? And am I spending maybe too much time working on some of these things? If I'm spending 2 hours writing a 2,000 word piece and it's getting me a bunch of money, yay, that's really great time investment. But am I spending, 1 week to write something that might be getting me paid like, $50. Is that worth it? Is that going to pay off later on down the road? So, and something that I keep having reiterated to me after that is free yourself from perfection. Writing doesn't always have to be beautiful. It's when you have a really great idea and being able to communicate that idea. It's very easy to get caught up in the details, but one grammar mistake is not going to make or break a piece. But we kind of always hold on to that because that's our little kind of bit of self-validation that we don't want to let go of. But it's okay. It's okay.
Hollie, both of you have mentioned the challenge of something I think we've all done. You go onto Google to search for something, and then what you find might not actually be particularly helpful. It might be just some kind of SEO'd into oblivion post to make that was going to just end up at the top spot. After attending this conference and kind of sharing the value of interacting with other people, what's something you feel like you want to pay more attention to moving forward that you think will be of help to you in the writing that you do?
I got a lot of good tips about what to look for in contracts. I think sometimes the wording can be hard to understand. They can be many pages long, and it's hard to spot problems if you don't know what you're looking for. There were some great materials in a shared drive after the conference with some concrete examples from one of the sessions. There were people sharing in the chat during the conference their own experiences. And it is good to have those materials to refer back to kind of go through contracts in the future and work out what the kind of wording that is problematic. So it is really great to have those resources from actual lawyers. There was one quote that stuck with me from the conference, which is that you could close your eyes, flip through a contract that you've been given as a freelance writer, and just sort of like pick one clause at random, strike it, and it will be better for you, the writer, once you've done that. And I just thought that was really memorable because it's so true. Like the contracts, it's full of all this stuff a lot of the time that you think, is this even relevant? Like, is this going to come up? And it can be quite difficult figuring out what you should not worry about and what is, potentially going to sign away some rights that you would rather hold on to or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Emily, what's the same occasion for you? When you think about all of the things that you learned, what's something that you took away that you might want to pay more attention to moving forward?
There were two things that I really connected with, and Hollie actually started getting into that with contracts. And one of them was learning what you're protected from and what you're not. And it's not something that we usually consider is how it's going to be handled if somebody comes back that you may feature in an article and they don't like it. And if they start bringing the rain with lawyers or any kind of other documentation, what is the entity that you wrote for and published with, what are they going to do to support you? And how are they going to make sure that you are taken care of? Because some of those contracts don't cover those things. It's not going to cover a lot. I mean, we're seeing a lot of crazy things happening right now with what Brewdog is doing and how they're going after people. It's the same thing. It's just in a written format. We always have to be aware of, we're putting something out there. We're putting something out there that can make us vulnerable. Do we have armor in case that comes back? Because there's one thing to just be like, social media, I'm mad at you. And then with the trolls, and then there's people actually taking legal action. And that's just something to all be aware of. But that also plays into the other part, is building your village and asking like, okay, what do I need and how can I better support others in this community? And I'm really glad that we have the North American Guild of Beer Writers, because I have questions. I didn't know what to do about things. So watching kind of what comes up in the Slack, what comes up in the newsletter, I'm learning more every day about how to operate in this world. And it's great because I have a village. If I have questions, I can send them out there. I asked one this past weekend, and it helped me get that press release done and put out into the universe. So it was really great to be able to have that, and just going through that conference, knowing that I'm not alone in just beginning to take those first steps.
Yeah.
And that there are people there that are willing to support me in so many different ways.
Well, it sounds like the human element of all of this, whether it's just because we can feel a little bit alone at times having doing this on our own, or just being digitally disconnected, it sounds like that's increasingly important. So I appreciate you both sharing a little bit of human insight from your takeaways from the event and what we all can use. Hollie, Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you.